writers such as myself, Richard Dolan, you, and other people are doing, because they don't know everything.
What's interesting when you say
they don't have time and personnel to research every archive.
But it's interesting because you're doing underground facilities, I'm doing Mill Lab and alien abductions, Richard's doing history, and between the three of us, we're presenting an awful amount of information. And not to take away from any other ufologists, because there's some good ones out there. It's just, between the three of us, the amount of information that is probably overwhelming for the average 101 or 202, person getting involved in the field. But I tell people all the time, don't feel overwhelmed, because you can start slowly, and all of us are approachable.
Just take it a page at a time.
That's it, and take your time. If you don't understand something, and I'll tell this again while we're on the air, feel free to write to any of us, ladies and gentlemen. And if you ever see any of us speaking at a conference, all of us are approachable. You can come up and talk to us if you've seen something or heard something or just don't understand something. Feel free to ask.
Yes, and with reading, it's like anything else. And the old Chinese saying applies here: the journey of 1,000 miles begins with the first step. You just plunge in. Yep. You get a book and you start reading. If this information interests you, and if you read 5 pages and your head is spinning, put it down.
Yep.
And come back to it later, another day. Because no one learns it all in just one sitting,
hell no. I've been doing
and
it
you
20
can't.
years.
But over time, you can learn more, and that's the point. We all should be informed. The system is designed to keep people ignorant, dumbed down, and
it is.
and manipulated. But you don't have to cooperate with that if you don't want to. You can learn. You can inform yourself. If the system is designed to keep you uninformed, you can make it your business to inform yourself. And you can start, certainly with my books, you can start with Richard Dolan's books, or actually there are a lot of books out there.
Yes, and I'm even putting out 2 this coming year. Oh, my God, I know.
We'll start with Joe Montalto's book.
Well, we got one coming out, Abduction at Navarre Beach, which is Linda and I and some very close friends of mine's personal experience. And then there's the Alien Abduction Handbook for contactees and researchers that's coming out.
Yes.
This thing is already 40 chapters long. God only knows how big it's going to end up being. But to make the point, ladies and gentlemen, even when I talk like with Richard, every time I talk to Richard, I learn something new. Either one of the Richards, for that matter, I usually learn something new. And understand this, if you ever meet a ufologist that tells you they know everything, you just need to turn around and walk away from them. Because I know a lot, but I don't even know close to everything.
Well, I would echo those sentiments, Joe.
Yeah.
I know more than when I knew when I began my research, but now I'm understanding how much there is to know, and I only know a small fraction of it.
Yeah. The more I learn there is to learn. I mean, it's like an oxymoron.
Yes, well, but that's the only way to proceed. Initially, you don't know much, and you think, well, I know pretty much, and then as you learn more and more and begin to know a great deal, you understand, yes, I know a great deal, but what there is to know is far, far, far larger than what I know.
Oh, yeah, and it is, too. But, it's fortunate because, somebody had asked me one time about if they could do some research, like get 8 or 9 of the big ufologists together and just accumulate all their data. I said, well, that would be a good thing. I said, but you really have to have a really good working knowledge of ufology before you try to attempt that, because there's an overwhelming amount of information out there.
And, Joe, I want to get back to a point that you were making a few minutes ago about the Gulf of Mexico and the oil rigs that are not really oil rigs when you approach them and you see that they are not oil production platforms. One of the things I've run across in my research was that elevators are actually located in the legs of many offshore oil production platforms. And what people have to understand is that these oil rigs are mammoth. They are just enormous. They are mind-boggling huge. Now, you live in southern Louisiana, and I used to live down there too, Joe, so I know I've been by these fabrication yards. McDermott and other companies have them. And when you actually see these things being put together on land in the fabrication yards, you say, oh my. And if you go over around Morgan City, say, or New Iberia, out to the west in New Orleans and Acadiana, you see these things, and they are just gargantuan. Now, they put these things together, and then they tow them down to the open sea in parts on barges, and even the parts going down the Intracoastal Waterway and down to the bayous there in southern Louisiana. You say, my God, can this thing be real? Because it looks like something from Jupiter or Saturn. They just look otherworldly. And they tow them out, and then they weld them together in parts and sink them in the open sea and embed them into the seafloor out there, well, miles out to sea. Well, when they do that, understand that you have an instant ready-made entrance to the sub-sea floor environment.
Oh, yeah,
you do. Get down into the seabed. Now, it's a fact that there is equipment, and there are equipment and instruments in these giant legs, which can be 10 or 20 feet across. They're just mammoth. And you can actually send men down in there to work on and maintain and operate the machinery and instruments that are in the legs of these platforms, which can actually be below sea level and actually even down inside beneath the seafloor, down in the seabed. And what I'm saying is that any one of these platforms can serve as an entrance and exit to and from the sub-sea floor environment, which means that a great many of these platforms could be entrances and exits to subsea bases, manned bases, down beneath the seafloor. And that's what Joe is telling you by implication when he says that some of these oil production platforms offshore in the Gulf of Mexico that on casual inspection appear to be oil production platforms aren't really. They are entrances and exits to installations beneath the seafloor, well out to sea.
And it is, and one of the things is, I'll tell you a little secret, ladies and gentlemen, if you ever happen to be in the Gulf or in the Atlantic or the Pacific where you see these big jack-up rigs, you'll notice that you'll see the four outer pylons, which is what Rich is talking about. And there'll be a center one. Now, the center ones are usually smaller because that's the one that holds the dual or the triple drilling instruments. But if you ever roll up to one and you see one that's about twice or three times the size of one of the outer legs, you know it's being used for something else. Because the reason they make them smaller is in case one of the arms break on the drilling, on the pipes break, it'll bend and it'll hit and it'll just slide down. If they're too big, it'll twist and pop and punch a hole through the side. That's why they're deliberately made smaller. So if you see them larger, then you know they're being used for something else. And some of these look as big around as a damn ship. And you've got to wonder what they're pumping. And let me tell you what, you will notice that there's an enormous amount of radar dishes and dishes and radar domes and stuff like that on aboard them. And occasionally, you will pull up on them if you get too close. You will see military. Usually Marines come stand out on the edge of the rig, usually toting guns. So you know right then and there you need to get away from there. You're messing with something you shouldn't be involved with.
Yeah, don't endanger your life.
Oh,
I'm
no,
not encouraging
right
anyone
there.
to endanger their life. But it is important to understand that since 1966, I document this in black and white in my third book. The United States Navy has had a capability to make manned installations beneath the seafloor, even hundreds of miles out to sea. And there are a number of ways they can do that, but one of the ways is just drilling down. In fact, the documentation I have makes it clear that petroleum industry technology is one of the things that can be used, surprise, surprise, to make an undersea base. And in fact, it appears that's been going on for many years. Now, in 1966, there was an official United States Navy document that came out of China Lake Naval Weapons Station in California called the Rock Site Concept. And that's just a title, the Rock Site. And the idea was that you could use a drilling rig, such as is used in the petroleum industry, and instead of drilling an oil well, you would drill a shaft in the seafloor, about maybe 10, 20 feet across. And then you would, in that hole, cement a huge stainless steel tube that you would then dewater.